Hey, Dr. C here with you. So, if you can't lose weight, there's some reasons why. And this is a big thing. Body weight is one of the biggest drivers of long-term health, and it's such a huge thing for psychosocial health as well. We want to feel confident about how we look and how we're perceived and how we're treated. We want to make sure that our risks are low and we feel our best. And this is also a big factor for so many chronic ongoing symptoms. Fatigue, depression, chronic pain. Weight drives all of that. But weight loss is not always easy. So I'm really happy to share a whole bunch of ways in which it may become easier and some things that could be holding it all back. So let's dive into this a little bit. For starters, we can think about problems with thyroid hormones, too little thyroid hormone. And this is probably one of the most obvious ones. People are aware of that being a big factor. But basically, thyroid hormones control how quickly we burn fuel. And if they're lacking, they slow metabolic rate more than any other known factor. So this is very relevant. Now, an important point here is there's too little hormone, but there's also thyroid autoimmunity. So even if there's enough thyroid hormone, the autoimmunity, the thyroid antibodies, they can make weight loss more difficult. So they are just as important to treat as is the abnormality of thyroid levels. Now, next up, this one is not intuitive, but it can be just as big of a factor. Too much thyroid hormone. So how does that happen? Well, someone may have a condition that makes too much, or way more commonly, they're on an excessive dose of a medication. And a paradox is that they might be on too much medication because a doctor thought it would help them lose weight. And this was an idea that went around in the past. So because too little thyroid hormone can cause weight gain, it would seem logical that extra could help weight loss. And there is a point at where massive amounts of extra thyroid do cause weight loss, but not healthy weight loss. They cause a loss of muscle and bone. But before that point of massive excess, it's really common that mild to moderate degrees of excess actually cause weight gain. And what happens there is the excess makes the body resist thyroid hormone and also makes the body resist the breakdown of stored fat. So we can specifically see weight gain and difficult fat loss from too much thyroid, just like we can from too little. Another big thought is that the idea that clean eating should automatically cause weight loss. And I've heard this one so much. People try really hard and they say, but I eat organic food, why can I not lose weight? And here's the thing. It's important to eat good food. There's a zillion arguments for that, and I'm in alignment with all of them. However, the quality of food has very little to do with our body weight. Not nothing. Now, it is true that highly processed food is easier to overeat than less processed food is. But that's an argument about not gaining weight. It's not an argument of losing weight. So high quality food by itself should not be expected to cause weight loss. Weight loss is not easy. Your body fights it, and it pretty much doesn't happen without a structured plan. Now, most find it easier to eat and be less unsatisfied when they're eating healthy food than when it's processed food. But again, healthy food alone almost never leads to spontaneous weight loss. Another big thing that blocks weight loss is fatty liver disease. Now, this is kind of a chicken and an egg because weight gain can cause it, and it can then further cause more weight gain. Basically, your liver burns and stores two kinds of fuel. It's burning glycogen and triglyceride. Now, glycogen comes from carbohydrate. Triglyceride comes from anything, and anything means carbohydrate, fat, ketones, and alcohol. All those can be made into triglyceride. And the liver has compartments for both. We can store precisely somewhere around 60 times more fat than we can store carbohydrate. 60 times. So way, way, way more fat, or also known as triglyceride. The paradox, though, is we need some carbohydrate to burn fat. So if there's too little carbohydrate in the liver, we can't burn the stored fat. And that's what's going on in the case of fatty liver. And in those cases, that ends up affecting body fat in general. There's more fat stored elsewhere in the body, but it's not effectively broken down. The process we call is beta oxidation. That's how the body burns fat for fuel. Ketosis is not how we burn fat. Ketosis is how we convert fat into ketones. We only burn fat via beta oxidation. And when that doesn't happen, we can't lose weight effectively. So understanding liver health and reversing fatty liver is essential for weight loss. Now, a related thing is insulin resistance. And this is a case to where the body is deliberately not burning some kind of fuel. So insulin is a signal that moves fuel into cells to be burned or stored. If the cells can't handle it, they may resist insulin. They may not respond to it. So when it happens, it's not that insulin is bad and it needs to go away. It's that the body's in a state where it cannot accommodate the fuel. So then we think again about the liver function and the liver health. Related thing we can see is high triglycerides. So different forms of fuel are stored in the liver, in the fat under the skin, in the fat around the organs, elsewhere. But there also fuels can be stored in the bloodstream. So when the body can't burn something, it leaves it in circulation. So triglycerides in the blood mean too much triglyceride in the deeper tissues, and the body can't burn them properly. That's a state that can cause this resistance to effective weight loss. Another big block is an abnormal cortisol rhythm. And this is interesting because this is something to where it changes where the fuel goes. In a healthy cortisol rhythm, where we make cortisol in the morning, we shut it down at night, the fuel goes to our muscle tissue, and we burn energy in our muscles. When that cortisol rhythm is wrong, more of that fuel goes around the organs and inside the organs, and that's dangerous. Now, cortisol is also a problem because it can change which foods we want. It can make us want more comfort food, and it can make us not satisfied as easily from food. So it's critical to address when that's present. Next consideration are what's called APOE gene variations. So somewhere around a quarter of the population has variations in the APOE enzymes. And what this means is they can't carry fats throughout their body the same way that other people can. And specifically, this relates to saturated fats. So any kind of fats that are solid at room temperature, that's actually the difference between fats and oils. So an oil is liquid at room temperature and a fat is solid. Coconut oil is kind of funny because it liquefies somewhere around 84 degrees. So in most cases at room temperature, it would be a fat. But oil, fat, yeah, it's closer to that line. But people with that variation, they can't tolerate saturated fats in the same ways. And that includes coconut oil. It also includes lard and butter and animal fats, all the things that are just greasy and solid. Their bodies can't circulate them safely and effectively. And it doesn't seem to apply to liquid vegetable oils. So things like olive oil or grapeseed oil, things like this don't seem to cause the problems. But the problems are really about cardiovascular risk, weight gain, and then Alzheimer's risk. And then also the effects from head trauma, which relate. So these are things that are much more pronounced in those with one of the APOE variations. Specifically, it's those who have the 4 allele. So they can have 4-4 or 3-4. There is a 2-4 allele, but it's very rare. But the 3-4 and the 4-4 alleles together make up about a quarter of the population. It differs a bit per ethnicity, but a lot of folks have that. And when they do, saturated fats are not their friend. They're better off with less of that. Another big block is too little dietary protein. And this is fascinating. It turns out that our hunger can be based largely on protein, sometimes even more so than just total caloric load. So it's common that we can eat and eat and eat until we hit a protein target. And some foods that don't have much protein require a lot of food to hit that target. Other foods that are more protein dense, we don't need to eat as much of them. We also know that protein affects basal metabolic rate and it also affects body composition. So better sources of dietary protein make it to where we're not as hungry, we burn calories better, and we grow muscle tissue more effectively. Related to this macro discussion is too much total dietary fat. So before, with the APOE, that was about the type of fat, but the total amount of fat can also be relevant. And it's not so much that fat is bad, but with calories coming from fat, protein, or carbohydrate, they're mutually exclusive. So the more you have of one, the less you can have of the others by proportionality. So too much fat can inhibit our capacity to have good protein and also healthy carbohydrate. In fact, a recent study showed that diets higher in fat have a higher risk for causing diabetes. And that's something that often really surprises people, but we know that from a great deal of medical research, that higher fat is not better. We want good quality carbohydrate and we want healthy fats, but all these things need to be there in certain proportions. Another dietary consideration are diets that are lower in total fiber. So we want a lot of total fiber. We want a lot of diversity of fiber as well. There's upwards of 16 categories of fiber, and the more variety of plant categories we consume, the more of these we get. So throughout the day, think about vegetables, fruits, legumes, intact whole grains, seeds, nuts, and of each of those 6 things, think about varieties within them. And the more different plants you can have from the more different categories, the more fiber diversity you'll have, and the easier that'll make it towards regulating body weight. Another big consideration is sleep. Quality of sleep, regularity of sleep, duration of sleep. This may be one of the larger controllable factors behind body weight. And that's not obvious, but a lot of our internal mechanisms that regulate our weight are taking place while we're sleeping. They've actually shown that you can take people and disrupt their sleep for several nights and cause them to appear diabetic in just a few nights. So this is very big. We also know that sleep has effects directly upon food preference and food volume, and then also food frequency. So how much you eat is highly tied into how well and how much you're sleeping. Another barrier, paradoxically, is chronic dieting. So if you're lowering your food intake too long, that lowers your basal metabolic rate, and it does that by changing how your body responds to thyroid hormones. It actually makes it where you don't burn fuel effectively. And the solution for this is a matter of having dieting be limited. And this is why in Metabolism Reset, I do that for set blocks of time. And I'll talk more about an overview of that later. Another barrier can be skipping breakfast. So it can seem like you're eating less food when you skip breakfast, but they've shown that the total amount of foods you eat throughout the day afterward is almost always greater, and total food quality is lower. There are some arguments about perhaps benefits by delaying certain meals or by having longer windows without food, but a lot of that research now is shifted towards end of day, not beginning of day. There's not really a lot of talk about skipping the earliest meals. Some are talking about just avoiding the nighttime snacking, always a good idea, or having dinner at an earlier time, also a good consideration, but don't skip your first meal. Few find that helpful when controlled studies are done. Medically, we also think about diabetes and pre-diabetes, and these really overlap with insulin resistance and fatty liver that we talked about. And these are common. Papers now show that somewhere around 51% of American adults either have diabetes or are close to it. And what happens is that pushes the body in that mode of storage. So a lot of these things, what do we do? What is the most effective way to go getting past some of these barriers? Well, some, like sleep, for example, are about just that, about fixing the sleep. But overall, the most effective strategies involve having weight loss be brief. So 4-week windows of weight loss. Also having it be simple. So meal replacement. There's good data around the simplicity of that, making it easier. So shakes for breakfast and lunch, good evening meals for dinner. And what happens there is it's simple, it's easier to stick with, but also it's an easy way to get more protein relative per calorie. Most foods, unless you're really going to be boring and have like chicken breast for breakfast and lunch, it's hard to get that much protein on that few calories. So these are some of the ideas behind the Metabolism Reset diet. But this is a process that's helped tens of thousands of people get past a lot of these barriers. So think through all these barriers, and if there's some that are obvious fixes for you, please do fix them. And once you do, the best general strategy is what I've found when I put together the Metabolism Reset. All right, Dr. C with you. Take great care. We'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.